All right, welcome everybody to Trash Talk, a TCG discussion. Trash Talk. I'm nearly crazy.
I'm Angry Toast.
Yeah, this is like sort of a podcast we're starting. We decided we've been kind of sitting on this boat for a while.
Yeah, or on the toilet.
Yeah, on the toilet, in the trash pile.
In the trash pile.
I'm dumpster diving through to figure out let's make a bunch of discussions. We made a whole Discord channel, just discussion topics. Probably have 30 or 40 in there at this point.
At least 2.
I mean, there's definitely more than none.
Yes,
There'd
there's
be
more
an
than
awkward
0.
channel otherwise.
Less than 100, more than 0.
But yeah, we were kind of thinking about we realized Jason and I have a lot of toast and whatever. Whatever.
My name is on the cards.
I mean, our name is everywhere. It's Toast and I kind of been discussing for a while. It's we have a lot of different views on things, but also share some too, especially because of our age gap and also just how we look at the industry and everything too.
Yeah, I'm 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
Or more. 10 at least.
At least one.
At least one, less than 100.
At least 2. Less than dead. But yeah, so we kind of figured this might be a good way to get some viewpoints out there, and it might be cool to get some of the audience too. They might have different viewpoints anyway.
Yeah. Sometimes we want to play games, sometimes we want to talk about games. And that's what this is all about.
Exactly. So our first topic we wanted to cover is we thought it was a pretty safe one and might get a little involvement too, is our top 5 favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
We basically made no rules around this other than you have 5 games and you can have honorable mentions. Toast really wanted 7.
I wanted 7.
I was we either do 10 or 5. And I was cutting it there because I'm we're not going to be inconcise with this. It's going to be a 5 or a 10. We're going to be done.
But he's got 12.
Well, I've got 5 and I got honorable mentions. And you don't know it's 12.
I don't know.
You'll find out.
We'll find out. Okay. So, do you want to start since you have 1 million?
Well, honorable mentions I figure we could just do in one run quick, and then we can go to your honorable mentions.
That's not going to work for me. I got it listed differently. But I'll let you start with your honorable mentions.
Okay. So my honorable mentions, I'll start off with something that's near and dear to my heart, and actually both of our hearts. I gotta put the Somnium Files up there.
Absolutely.
That was a game that, when we played through it this year, when I first saw the trailer that was the second one was coming to Xbox, I'm oh, awesome! But I have no idea what's going on. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, Xbox Japan was yeah, by the way, it's coming to Game Pass, the first one. I'm oh? And I was just jumping on that. And so I had it downloaded, and one day we looked at it and we're that could be good for content.
So then we played it.
And then we fell in love with it.
I was actually just editing before Crazy came over, and I'm just man, the memories. It's such a good game.
We literally, how many hours did we spend in that 2-day time frame?
16? 20?
We spent so many hours in a 2-day time frame. I kind of felt bad because I'm we're totally burning ourselves on the ground here, but it's so good and worth it in my opinion. So yeah, the Somnium Files, check it out if you haven't. The Wolf Among Us was another honorable mention of mine. It's the one Telltale game I absolutely fell in love with. Still waiting on that second one. Telltale, stop announcing new games and just work on the one you already announced. Bastards. Another honorable mention, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. That's one I'm hoping we get to do on the channel soon. The audio design is next to none. It's one of those games where you see it's an indie game and you look at it's not as combat focused as some people probably hoped it was.
The IO design? What do you mean by that?
The audio design.
Oh, audio design.
Yeah, it's one of those games you need to wear headphones with it. To get the full experience, you need to. I think it's one of those games where I love the story and the audio and music so much where I was well, I love this game. And when I saw Ninja Theory got bought up by Xbox, I'm please announce a Hellblade 2 and just put all the money into it. And they're hey, guess what? We're announcing it with the Xbox. I'm oh? And then they showed a new trailer just last week, 2 weeks ago at TGA's. And I'm
last week?
It was a couple weeks ago now, I think, actually.
Time just...
time is a circle that turns into a trapezoid. Saw that trailer, I'm this looks amazing, and I can't wait for more. So yeah, Hellblade is up there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels of the Roses. It was if anyone knows what that was or doesn't know, it was basically a deck-building chess sort of mix-up game. It's a grid-based, you put cards down, you move around like chess pieces almost, and you have a command deck builder person who runs around the map too that you summon cards through that character. It was the weirdest mix of elements you could for Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, but it was amazing.
Might have to get you to play a couple of those.
Yeah, because that is definitely... There is nothing else like it that I've seen. It's kind of crazy, and I'm still mad at Konami for not remastering it. I would pay $60 for a half-ass port of it. I'm honest.
Yeah. That's why they make money on us fools.
Yeah.
Because we do that.
Honorable mention is Halo 4. People know I love Halo, and Halo 4 is my favorite Halo. And that series is amazing to me, and the fact that Halo 4 was the game that got me back to playing the older games and respecting them in a different way because of how much they gave Master Chief more of a character. Because before in the games, he was kind of just someone you
Your
pretended
avatar.
to be. But then Halo 4 actually gave him more of a voice and character, and like the whole thing that happens with him and Cortana just almost nearly brought me to tears. Almost. That's a different game that did that, though. Another honorable mention, BioShock 1 and 2. Two of the greatest simulation shooters out there. Rapture is amazing. BioShock 1 has the best story of the trilogy. BioShock 2 has the best gameplay.
I don't know if I'd even call it a simulation shooter. I'd say that it's more of a storytelling shooter. Like, storytelling and shooting doesn't go well hand in hand. I can't think of another game that... Dead Space, kind of. I mean, that's a storytelling... But it doesn't even have that much of a story. BioShock has a story.
Yeah.
BioShock releases its story and has an antagonist. And like, BioShock is very story-driven.
See, I think the reason why a lot of people call it a simulation of sorts, too, is because of, like, it being a spiritual successor to System Shock. And that was very much a simulation, like... Just because it's simulated doesn't mean it doesn't have a story either.
Right, no, I don't, the simulation part, and that's a topic for another game categories, but the simulation part is like, well, I mean, games are simulations, period. Yeah. It's the same as calling RPG elements and everything that has a level up system.
And I just think everything BioShock has done for the industry so far, like, developers like Arcane, their games obviously have very much a BioShock DNA. Like, you look at Dishonored, you look at Prey, you look at even Deathloop, and you can kind of see, wow, how far have we come? It's kind of insane.
I don't know, I still...
But I mean, there's a reason why it's an honorable mention. Freaking loved it. And then my last honorable mention, this one's kind of insane for me, because if you told me 2 years ago a From Software game would be on my honorable mentions, I would tell you you're probably insane. Because I don't like the Dark Souls games for the combat. I love the world, though.
Yeah,
but there was a little game that was published by Activision and developed by From Software that I absolutely fell in love with. It was called Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. And I think that was the first time I've ever fallen in love with a From Software game for more than just its story and its world. And that's another game I hope someday we can get to on the channel, because I spent so much time in that game in like a 1 weekend time frame where I 100%ed it because I love that game so much. That's my honorable mentions. How about you?
Okay, well, actually, I just want to start with my 5.
That's fine. That works for me.
So, since it's already been brought up, the honorable mention for the favorite game that I've played this year, and I haven't played very many, because, I don't know, I'm old, and I buy games. I don't play them. But, Halo Infinite, surprisingly, like, did I play, Remnant this year? I can't remember. If I played Remnant this year, then Remnant would take that spot.
So you're talking about Remnant from the Ashes?
Yeah, Remnant from the Ashes. But I don't think I've played Remnant from the Ashes this year. Halo Infinite has taken up the vast majority of my gameplay time, and I'm not a Halo fan. I'm not a shooter fan. But Halo's, at least the multiplayer, I haven't played the campaign yet, but the multiplayer is balanced in such a way that I can feel like I can actually, like, once you get used to the controls and everything else, I can feel like I can contribute eventually. It's not just full of toxic people and people who are far too good at the game that I can just jump in and I'm like, I can't compete. Like so many multiplayer online games, I jumped in, lost a few, started getting better, and I'm not good by any means, but Halo Infinite is my honorable mention for favorite game that I've played this year. And my favorite game that I played this year, played in quotations, it has to be AI Insomnium Files. Like, it just has to be. It is, as I said, I was editing some videos and looking back, listening to them talk, and Mizuki talking and us laughing about it, and like, it's just a wonderful game. It is the best story-driven game. I don't know, it might be one of the best story-driven games of all time that I can think of.
It's insane, like when you're going into it blind.
Yeah.
And it just grabs you and you're like, oh. Even we saw the trailer for it, and like we had basically no idea other than, a murder mystery with maybe time elements, maybe.
Yeah, there's just certain gameplay mechanics probably could have been done better, but the storytelling was easily covered up over anything else. And the humor, the flyer and the flyer, the mama bee in a fridge, all of the things. Like, it was just a beautiful, beautiful game.
Kagami.
Kagami, yeah.
The MVP.
There's my 2 favorite games that I've played this year, the honorable mention and my favorite.
So before we go further, I gotta double check. So the rest of your games aren't just from this year, right? This is
that's the category. That's this specific category.
Because I think it'd be cool to do a discussion topic on our favorite games that we played this year too. And obviously we've got whatever, but it's something we'll talk about later. But I'm glad to see that you're loving Halo though. Like,
yeah.
People being happy about Halo makes me happy because it's been so many years where the community's been so unhappy. And it makes me sad because I'm like, I don't dislike everything that 343 has done, and I think people are a little bit more dramatic with everything that's happened because they're not Bungie. And Bungie is such a huge name in the industry that it's kind of like people felt the same way with Epic and Coalition when it came to the Gears series too, and I've kind of bounced back and forth with those people's opinions too. But seeing people finally, like, they've done it, and just about, it's like unanimous across the board. People are like, this is the best Halo game 343's put out. It's up there with the originals. I'm like, thank God we're past that hill.
Yeah.
And now people can be excited for Halo again without people be like, well,
can you translate that into English?
Boys is Call of Duty. I'm like, because they put sprinting mechanics in? Yeah, no, that's a whole different topic for another time. We could do a whole episode on Halo, and we probably would have to do like a 3-part series, but I'm excited people are happy about Halo again. I'm excited that people like you that have never gotten into the series before are jumping into it now, and like, or I've gotten into it very limited.
Yeah, I played Halo 2 and tried some PvP, and people were jumping all over the place like a fool, and people were hiding in the rafters and off the map and doing all this crazy glitchy crap, and it just made it really not fun.
It's the Super Mario of gunners, shooters.
It just really wasn't fun, and I used to make fun of Halo for 12, 15 years, and I'd be like, well, what am I? And I'd take the pose and I'd just jump around the house. Like, people, I'd be like...
Well, I can tell you it's not Gears, so there's no jumping in those.
Nope. Morcus.
Dumb. Alright.
Your turn.
Well, my number 5 is Yakuza 0. So I want to say, was it last January? So January of 2020? I think they finally started bringing the Yakuza games to Xbox. They started with 0, and I was like, well, I've heard so many good things about these games from just friends and people, like, online and everything, where I'm like, I want to give this a shot. And when I first got into it, I'm like, oh, this is fun. And all of a sudden, like, get hit with a story moment. Like, I'm actually kind of, like, within the first hour of the game, they have a story moment where, like, I'm already kind of tearing up right now. I'm like, what are you doing to me, this game? And all of a sudden, they slap a side story on you, and you're, like, laughing your ass off the entire time. Like, what is going on here? And then I start almost crying, and then laughing, almost crying due to, like, sadness, and then crying. I'm like, what is going on? And this game is such a wild ride. And the fact this isn't even the first game in the series, but they retroactively went back. I think it was Yakuza 5 was the last one they did, and then went to 0 to do a prequel to all the other games, and retrofit it into the series to make it so it works. I think it's probably one of the most amazing things they could have done. And I fell in love with both Kiryu and Majima, which are two mainstays of the entire franchise. And they find their own unique ways to bring them in. And it made a Yakuza fan out of me to the point where I played all 8 mainline Yakuza games within a 1.5-year time frame. And that's a lot of Yakuza. Especially when they're like 30 to 40 hour games each. It's kind of like, Nani?
Up to 80 and 90, I read, if you're trying to complete them.
Depending, I think Yakuza 0 might be the one that takes like 120 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a little much for me. Maybe someday I will, like, I've 100% Yakuza 6, because that's supposedly the easiest 100%. So maybe someday I'll get around to Yakuza 0, but it's a lot. It's got me into enough where I'm playing through the Judgment games now, too, and those are a spin-off of the Yakuza series, and I just can't get enough.
Yeah, the way you were just talking about it makes me... It describes the same way I feel about AI.
Yeah.
Is you're laughing, and then you're mad, and then you're crying, and then you're laughing again, and the emotional tempo is, at least in AI, was wonderful, and it sounds like it is the same way in Yakuza.
Yeah, basically, it's like you would for any anime where it's got your sad moments and your what the hell is going on moments. but like in a noir crime story, and basically you're just this unbreakable force beating the crap out of everybody in your way, and somehow it works, and I love it for that. But yeah, that's my number 5, Yakuza 0.
Well, I didn't rank mine.
That's
I
fine.
cheated. I categorized mine.
That's fine. You do whatever you want with your list, as long as it's not 7.
Well, I mean, I kind of have 10.
It's okay. I kind of have like 13 in a way, depending on how you look at it.
So, this is an honorable mention for my favorite game that I've never beaten.
Okay.
So, the honorable mention is Salt and Sanctuary.
Okay.
It's a 2D Souls-like game which uses salt instead of souls, but has the death mechanic where you go back and get your blood spot. It's got a very gothic world sort of feel. It's not exactly linear. It's kind of like it's like Dark Souls 2D. It's got some weapons. The mechanics are a little bit clunky, just like Souls, but 2D, so it's easier in some ways. It's also, well, I mean, when you talk about Souls, like, you're also saying Metroidvania too, because that's the part of the 2D is you're exploring up and down and collecting and whatnot. But that's my honorable mention. I've never beaten it just because I took a break and never came back, and now if I think about going back, it's like, well, I just want to start a new character. I was so far, I don't remember any of it.
Tale as old as time.
And my other favorite game that I've never beaten, the top favorite game that I've never beaten, I've invested, I think the last time I looked at my PS2 memory card, I had 120 hours into the game. It's Final Fantasy 12.
I was waiting for you to say Ape Escape 3.
I love the Final Fantasy series, and I've beaten all of them except for 12 and 15. And, well, all of them up to 12, and then I haven't beaten one since. But I actually played the shit out of 12. I enjoyed the Gambit system where I could control people using programming sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. The hunts made me feel badass, and actually that's where I ended up stopping. Like, the story wasn't great. The story was okay. It was the Gambit system that really drew me in. But there was a boss, the biggest final bad boss with the 30 billion HP, mm-hmm. and it's supposed to take like 20 hours to beat, even with a perfect setup. And yeah, that's where I ended up stopping, because I got him down to like a third health, and college got crazy, and I never went back. And I'm like, well, I don't want to, because if you leave the area, you leave your progress. And now it's been probably 10 years since I played it, and I can't go back into it, but I don't have the heart. Like, I've tried to restart it and play it, and I don't have the heart to do it anymore.
Maybe I can do it for you, because I need one of my biggest gaps in my gaming history is the older Final Fantasy games. Like, I own all the ones that ever came to Xbox now, aside from Pocket 15 edition, because I love Final Fantasy 15, but Pocket I never got around to buying, because I'm like, I don't want to replay the same game in a chibi format. Thanks, though. I mean, maybe it's like $5, maybe I'll be like, yeah, I'll throw money at you and then never play you. But,
didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, 12 is the one that I hear is like one of the most divisive games in the series.
Yep, because
like 13 is like almost universally hated, but 12 is like the one where half people love it, half people seem to not.
Well, they broke away from the format. They broke the format after 10 games. Even Final Fantasy 11 was semi-turn based. Mm-hmm. Although 11 and 12 were the 11 was the transition into 12 essentially. Okay. But they broke the turn based, and that's what all JRPG fans grew up on. Mm-hmm. Like American JRPG. I know there are a lot of other JRPGs that are action based, like Star Ocean, which should be on this list too, but it didn't quite fit.
Cool. Gotta love that Final Fantasy representation. So my number 4 is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Sort of an honorable mention was the first game, because it was one of those things where, like, when we decided we were doing only 5 games on this list, I was like, well, I can't have 2 Ori games in my top 5, because I love them both equally. But I decided, because Will of the Wisps is the newer one with a better combat design, and just as amazing of a story and soundtrack, I had to go with it. And there aren't often times where I fall in love with Metroidvania games. This is one of those times. Actually, it was the 2 times from both games, but when this game finally came out, what was it, in 2019? Like, when they first announced the sequel, I was freaking out because I'm like, I love the first game. And when the second one was announced, I'm like, let's go. And for years, we started seeing more and more of it. Like, could just please come out. Please come out. And it did. And the fact that they actually made it so Ori could fight himself, and just all the extra abilities, and just the animation is so breathtaking in the Ori games, it's amazing to me. And I don't know how to explain the story much more that wouldn't spoil the first game.
Yeah, I know nothing about Ori.
They are something else, and that's all I can really say about them. Yeah, if you like Metroidvanias, or you like artistically amazing looking games in a solid soundtrack, you should probably be playing the 2 Ori games. Just saying. And yeah, that's my number 4.
Super Saiyan?
Super Saiyan. It's over 9,000 likes.
Let's see. Here is my honorable mention for my favorite series.
Okay.
And my favorite series is Castlevania.
Oh, I didn't see that coming at all.
Well, I mean, this is my list.
Yeah, I know.
My favorite game from the series is Symphony of the Night, but I enjoy the 2D. So 1 through 3, not so much, but Symphony of the Night, and then all of the handheld Castlevanias that emulate that style. And then also I do enjoy Curse of Darkness. I think that's the one where you breed your pets. But that's the only 3D Castlevania that I really care about. The reasons for loving Castlevania are pretty obvious. The killer soundtrack, the exploration, the growing into your godhood and power. Like, that's standard. But my favorite all-time series, and this isn't going to be a surprise at all, is Final Fantasy. I grew up on them. I've beaten one. I even participated in randomizer races for Final Fantasy 1 where they take the items and spread them all over, and you try to find them and beat the game in a reasonable amount of time. Like, I've beaten 1, I've beaten 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I've played all of the rest of them. And then my favorite game out of the series is Final Fantasy VI. It had heartbreaking moments and dynamic, like, neat mechanics that with the Espers teaching you the skills or the spells. Yeah, it's just my all-time favorite classic game. All my all-time favorite game series.
I think the most common compliment and favorite Final Fantasy I usually hear is anywhere between 6 to 9. It's usually you either love 6, 7, 8, or 9 the most, and rarely you hear someone say 10. But
well, I've heard 10 a number of times.
Yeah, but like it's always crazy to think that was such a long time ago.
I know, I know it was,
and people just love those specific like 5 games, 4 games, whichever way you want to look at it.
They're generally the introduction into their RPG life.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I can't think of a good JRPG type game. I mean, I suppose Octopath Traveler, but I haven't even played it yet.
Nope, I haven't either. I have it.
I should play it. Yeah, it's the Final Fantasy series usually is the break into it, or the Dragon Warrior series, because those are. That's not a no.
Oh no! We're gonna have this discussion.
No. You cannot put Final Fantasy and Pokemon in the same.
Where about
realm.
you? Because my number 3 is Pokemon Gold.
But you can't put them in the same realm as Final Fantasy. You can put them in different classes and call them excellent apart. You can't put them together. You can't compare them.
How about you? Cloud's about to summon a Caesar.
Alright, your turn.
Yeah, my number 3 is Pokemon Gold. I thought that was a perfect transition in. We can't put them together, but they're going to be right next to each other right now.
That's fine. They can be next to each other. It's just not the same.
See, well, the thing I always hear people explain for Pokemon, I don't find this to be a bad thing at all, is it's like baby's first RPG. I find nothing wrong with that, because it really brings a lot of a younger audience into a type of game that they might have never gotten into. And
I suppose because they don't make really good younger audience RPGs anymore. Like
No.
Dragon Quest kind of is, but it's gotten a lot more adult theme as the people who grew up with it become adults.
Yep. And like the next one they said is actually going to get much darker too. So we'll see how that goes.
So now we're gonna need a new Pokemon.
Yeah.
A new.
Well, no, Dragon Quest is getting much darker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But
I thought you meant our Pokemon was about to get darker. I'm like, what?
no,
Really?
Pokemon does like dark things. Like, hey, we're dark, but also like, by the way, a wedgie. And here you go.
Lavender Town, where everyone's dead.
Like, I'm trying to think. I think like Nino Kuni, maybe, and Yokai Watch were kind of going with the Pokemon audience for a while too, but nothing has stayed as long as Pokemon. But now we're getting to the point where, obviously, there's a lot of younger players that play Pokemon, and then there's a lot of people that grew up with Pokemon that are still playing it.
Absolutely. I mean, Pokemon's been not as long as Final Fantasy, but it's been a real long series. I mean, and it had its own television show, still has its own television show, has a mobile game, which, you know, I know they're not the same. They're not, the Niantic and Game Freak aren't. Are they paired at all now?
No. So how the Pokemon license works is it's split between three companies. It's between Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures Company. And Niantic's just contracted out to do Pokemon Go, and that's it.
Huh.
And like, I think Nintendo owns a little bit of Creatures Company, but they don't own anything of Game Freak. So it's a weird trifecta, because like people always associate, obviously, Pokemon with Nintendo because...
Right, it's where it
basically
is.
a Nintendo franchise, but it's not fully owned by them, which is really weird. And I wonder how long that'll be until Nintendo's like, hey, you're coming inside now. you're going to be part of the family now. Thanks. But, yeah, it's...
Yeah, considering that they're in their Smash Brothers games and everything Pokemon except for Go has been Nintendo.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's even... It's probably got Nintendo branding everywhere on it too still, but...
Yeah. Oh, God, it's been so long since I played Go.
Yeah. But yeah, Pokemon Gold is one of those ones where it's both a bit of nostalgia and my appreciation just for that game. I remember, I forget how young I was. I got my Game Boy Advance. I think it was for... I think it was for my birthday. And, so I'd gotten that, and like, later that week, one of my birthday presents was Pokemon Gold for Game Boy Color. And I looked at it, and like, I was so young, I didn't know, is this gonna work in my Game Boy Advance? And when I put it in, I was like, oh, it does. And I looked at it, I was like, this doesn't look as pretty as my other games, because it's not really as sophisticatedly colored as the Game Boy Advance games itself. But I got into it, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And I remember my first starter, even though it's not my favorite starter in the series, was a Cyndaquil, and I named it Good Boy.
You had a good boy.
Yeah, I had a Good Boy. And although I was kind of mad because I didn't know how to change his name back to Cyndaquil.
So he was forever Good Boy.
He was forever a good boy. And I will always remember Good Boy. Yeah, I just fell in love with the series. It was my first Pokemon game ever.
Ah.
And just playing through it, I was like, this is really cool. And like seeing a legendary Pokemon for the first time, I'm like... Because like, I saw Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, I think is the correct pronunciation. And I'm like, what the heck are these things? And you see Ho-Oh, and you're like, that's a giant firebird. Whoa. And then once you beat the game, you're like, oh, that's really cool. I wonder what else you can do. And then they unleash the entirety of Kanto on you. Because after you beat Johto, it's like, what do you do now? But they let you go through the entirety of Kanto as well. So it's literally 2 regions in one game, and I'm like, this is insane. And spoilers for like a however old game. This game's been out since
Forever.
early 2000s. But you get to fight Red at the end of the game. I thought that was really cool.
Like punch him in the face?
No, you get to fight his like level 70 Pikachu.
Oh.
And his Charizard and Snorlax and I think Lapras and I forget what else was there. Probably like a Pidgeot. But yeah, it was just really cool. And they introduced some of my favorite Pokemon of all time. And I don't know if that's partially because it was my first Pokemon game, so I got associated with a lot of these guys.
Probably.
But Caesar, Tyranitar, Kingdra, Feraligatr, who was my favorite starter, even Typhlosion, Umbreon is my favorite Eevee evolution. Like, these are all Gen 2 Pokemon here. Yeah.
Sorry, you can see my eyes glaze over.
Yeah, he's just
you're
like,
saying words.
Like, just wait till Digimon Survive comes out, and you'll be like, what the heck is he talking about?
Oh, I remember a Digimon game. I think it was Digimon World. You had to clean up poop all the time.
Oh, I'm so excited for that new Digimon game. But that's aside the point. Oh. Yeah, Pokemon Gold just... It got me really into, like... I liked video games before. And I think Pokemon Gold's what got me to love them. because I spent so much time in that game, and I don't think I really love Sapphire and Ruby as well, which are the ones after Gold and Silver, but I don't think anything can ever stand up to Pokemon Gold for me, and I don't think it'll ever happen with the Pokemon series, and that's fine, because it's a mix between nostalgia and also some badass Pokemon. But
That was Final Fantasy 2 for me.
okay,
I mean, it's not my favorite one because it's what brought me into it.
yeah,
Final Fantasy 6 is it's 4 and 6.
Yeah.
But I remember going to the moon and it just was all magic. Or when Porom and Polom died, and I just the feels. But yeah, that's what made me fall in love with games too. Is yep.
funny story too. So a couple of years ago, I was having a dark period in my life, and I found out they had released Pokemon Gold and Silver onto the 2DS and 3DS store, and it was one of those moments where I need something to really pick me up. I literally bought a 2DS, and the first thing I bought was Pokemon Gold for my 2DS. It's $10. I'm that's worth $10. I also bought the new Pokemon game at the time too. It was Ultra Moon or something. But I wasn't ashamed. It was I bought this mainly for this old game that I have no other way to access at this point, and I loved it. And that's another topic for another time. Nintendo and games in general just being able to keep themselves around. But
yeah, was that I had the very same thing with the handheld Castlevania series.
Yeah,
I don't like playing handhelds, but I like Symphony of the Night, and I really wanted to play games like that legally, so I bought a 2DS, I bought all those games, and because of I hate handhelds, personally. I'm not shitting on anyone else who likes them, but
just make sure you check it personally, though, just in case.
But then they came out on Steam, and I'm like, yes!
That's the Advanced Collection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, classics. Alright, what's your next one?
Alright, let's see, I've done that one, and that one, and that one. Favorite game to replay.
Okay.
The honorable mention is Dungeon Defenders. Not 2, but...
Dungeon Defenders 2 is completely different.
Yeah. I played Dungeon Defenders 1, mostly not idle. There was some idle time in there where I just set up automatic defenses. But Dungeon Defenders 1, I played for 30 some odd hours. I also bought Dungeon Defenders Eternity, and there was another one, there were 2 repurchases. I had all the DLCs. I keep trying to revisit it. Shut up, coffee maker. But yeah, Dungeon Defenders was one of my favorite games to replay, just because of the sheer amount of time I put into it. But my favorite game to replay at any point, you pop it in, I'm down for a session, is Earth Defense Force.
Okay.
I own 2017, 2025. I literally have owned, or I do own, all of them. I would not recommend Insect Armageddon unless that's your first game, or unless you can separate Earth Defense Force from it. But Earth Defense Force 2017 always has a special place in my heart, and like I said, pop it in anytime. I will replay the shit out of that, and I don't consider it a favorite series because they're all very similar. Mm-hmm. It's when you go from one game to the next game, and it's kind of like you're playing the same game, and in many cases, you are playing the exact same maps.
To an extent, that's how I feel about the Yakuza series. If it wasn't for the story being different and crushing my soul every 5 seconds, the gameplay is very similar with a couple of chinky decisions here and there throughout the series. But yeah, you have definitely told me many times you love Earth Defense Force. Yes. I'm not surprised by the answer at all.
Absolutely.
And Dungeon Defenders, that's a game on the 360 I loved playing.
God.
And I was so mad they never made it backward compatible, but they just re-released it in the last year or two, right?
Yeah.
Reawakening or whatever it was. Yeah.
I own that too. I've put 10 hours into it.
Okay. That's one I've been meaning to buy for a while, because it was one of those things. I think it was $20. I'm like, you know what? I would pay $20 and play Dungeon Defenders again, because that was a fun game.
I would pay $60 if I could just get into it, but I can't. I've never been able to recapture
that magic.
The magic, man.
Did Dungeon Defenders 2 spoil you that much, where you're like, this sucks? And it ruined
Dungeon Defenders 2 broke me. I used to hook 4 controllers up so that I could have all the map control without having to play with friends. I bought 10 copies of Dungeon Defenders, 4 people. And all the DLCs because I enjoyed it that much.
I heard Dungeon Defenders 2 was such a weird launch, too, because they,
Yeah.
for some reason, decided it was going to be a PS4 timed exclusive. It was probably on PC at the same time, too.
Yeah, it's...
Or maybe it was even in early access before, but then it launched on PS4, I'm like, this is a really weird decision, like, why would you... Okay, whatever. Right. And then when people on PS4 were playing it, it seemed like people were, like, not happy with it. I'm like, that isn't good. And when I started seeing gameplay, I kind of understood, I'm like, oh, this isn't the Dungeon Defenders I fell in love with.
No. It's free to play, which is a hard model to do well. Mm-hmm. Halo Infinite did it. Just throwing that back out there. Halo Infinite did the free to play. It's fun. I gave them money for the battle pass because it's like, hey, I put 40 hours in here. You have $30. Like, I'm fine with this.
I think I'm definitely okay. Like, I think for the most part, they've definitely done free to play well. I think the only thing they need to work on is, like, I think the armor prices are a little insane for what you get.
They're also cosmetics.
Yeah, but I mean, $20 for an armor set that you can't even put on all the other pieces is a little insane. But like,
I'm sure that they'll get there someday.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where it's like, if I don't want it, I'm not going to buy it.
Exactly. So, you don't have to buy it either.
Yeah.
It's not pay to win. Yeah.
A whole discussion for another time too. I think that's one of the ones we brought up is free to play and I can definitely see why you would love both those series because they've captured the hearts of so many people.
Oh, man.
And I guess series is a strong word for Dungeon Defenders.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit that.
It's one really good game and then one game that I'm sure found an audience, but a lot of people were unhappy.
One really good game that was remade and then remade again. And then we've got the current, and then two in the current iteration, which I really don't know. I have the Legendary Pet because I bought it super early.
Nice. Alright, so my number 2 is Gears of War 3. So, funny story about Gears of War 3. The first time I ever played a Gears of War game, I think it was Thanksgiving at my grandma's place. My cousin had brought his 360 over, and he was showing me, like, hey, check this game out. And I think we were playing Gears of War 2 multiplayer, 1v1. And he destroyed me, because it was the first time I ever played Gears. And I'm like, oh? And I think I chainsawed him, like, once or twice. And, you know, if you're a big Gears player, that's a really cheap move to do in multiplayer, is just use a chainsaw nonstop.
It's my favorite thing!
It is
what
awesome,
made me
though.
fall in love with Gears 1. Like, I never do PvP, but when you can hide around a corner and wait for somebody, and they're like, jerk!
And then you just scream, duh!
Like, no, chainsaws are great.
But, yeah, and that made me... I think that might have been the moment where I was like... I grew up on Nintendo and PlayStation at that point. I was a huge diehard PlayStation guy at that time.
Yep.
And when I had played Gears 2, and I had played a little bit of Halo 3, and I'm like, I really need to get an Xbox. And so when I got my 360, first games I got with it, that, like, because it came as a gift, I got Left 4 Dead 2, Alien vs. Predator, and Black Ops with it. The first game I bought with my own money on it, though, I got the trilogy pack where it was Gears of War 1, 2, and the DLC for 2. Because it was before because Gears 3 was coming out later that year. So I bought and played through. I got like halfway through Gears 1. I was like, I'm not feeling this as much, but it's possibly because of the muddy atmosphere and everything. I'm like, this is all a bunch of grays and browns. And then so I put in Gears 2 and I fell in love immediately. Went back and played Gears 1 and I'm like, this is insane. I need to play Gears 3 when it comes out. And they announced the beta. And I'm like, okay, I'm definitely getting that beta. So my dad literally offered to drive to GameStop for me. He put in the $5 reserve of my money or whatever and brought back the code or whatever. Downloaded Gears 3 beta. I went ham. I loved it. The beta was broken at times. Like, I swear to God, I got sniped by a sawed-off shotgun at one point. I'm like, how does that even happen? But it is what it is. It happens. But I fell in love with that. And that was the moment where I realized Gears 3 was going to be the first game I ever pre-ordered. And then I saw some of the pre-order bonuses, and I loved, it was called the Savage Cantus. It was a character that you get from pre-ordering from Amazon, and I'm like, I want that guy. So, convinced my mom I gave her the money, and she pre-ordered on Amazon for me. And I was so excited to get my Savage Cantus. But as soon as, like, during high school, I wasn't allowed to play games during the weekdays. It was only the weekends I got to play. And there was the one exception. My mom was like, yep, tonight you can play a couple hours of Gears 3, and I'm like, yeah! So I get to play a couple hours, was in love with it, and then I found out that week I was scheduled a 2-hour shift at my workplace on a Friday. And I'm like, this is just trying to piss me off, isn't it? So as soon as I got done working like a 5 to 7 or whatever on a Friday, I got home, and I think I was up till like 2 or 3 a.m. just playing Gears 3 to finish the story.
Oh,
and
man. I remember those days.
Gears of War 3 was the first time I ever cried during a video game. Because at one point specifically, it wasn't the ending. Everyone that's played Gears 3, you know the moment I'm talking about. Yeah, all around me are familiar faces, and I was crying. You just hear that piano playing, you see the explosion. Oh.
I could guess.
And I mean, I'm just gonna do it right now. Spoiler alert for a Gears 3 moment. Gears 1 and 2, I didn't really overly care for Dom. Gears 2, I cared about him a little bit more. But I thought he was kind of whiny most of the time. And I'm like, I'm just Marcus, I don't care. And then Gears 2 with Dom's wife was a sad moment, but I was still like, well, Dom is probably my least favorite out of the 4 of them. And then Gears 3, they slowly made him grow on me. And I was loving his character, and then they killed him.
I thought we were gonna talk about Carmine.
No. Carmine lived in that one.
Did he?
Yeah, Clayton. There was a whole campaign where they're like, save Carmine or kill Carmine. And the fans voted for him to live, so Clayton lived.
Huh. So they killed Dom instead.
Yeah, he's the only Carmine that's lived so far, I think, out of all the games. But yeah, when that moment where Dom turns around the vehicle and he's talking to Maria, I was already starting the tears, and then when the explosion happens and you see Marcus trying to go to the vehicle and Anya and I think Sam are holding him back and he's crying for Dom, and all of a sudden you hear the piano start playing, that was the moment where the waterworks just went loose. And like, a lot of people look at the Gears games like, this is a dude bro shooter. I'm like, yeah, but bros have feelings.
Yep.
And bros felt.
Huh.
Yeah. And between the campaign being amazing, my favorite campaign still to date, the Horde mode was awesome. They implemented so many new things. They had the Silverback, which was that giant mech suit thing. They had Beast mode, which was really cool, where you could play as the Locust, killing AI humans. I was like, this is kind of wild that I'm just running around as a berserker and just destroying things. And the multiplayer was just second to none. Some of my favorite maps are still from Gears 3. And even like Gridlock, which is basically the Nuketown of the Gears series, where it's basically in every game except for maybe Gears 5 now at this point. The dark night atmosphere that they did to the Gridlock was perfect in my opinion. But yeah, that's why Gears 3 is my number 2, and it was my number 1 for the longest time until my first game came up. But we'll get there when we get there.
Well, my last category, because YouTube is such a big thing in my brain. It exists. I am YouTube. My last category is my favorite games to watch.
Okay.
We don't just do this. I actually really, really enjoy watching YouTube. Haven't watched any TV because of it. Anyway, moving on.
Makes things cheaper.
Absolutely. Honorable mention, due to the thousands of hours, like literal thousands of hours of gameplay that I've watched of this series, is The Binding of Isaac. I've watched thousands of hours of the original and thousands of hours of remake, of Afterbirth, of the Afterbirth Plus, and now, well, I've watched a couple hundred hours of Repentance. But Binding of Isaac, I have watched insane amounts. Mainly, just as a shout out, mainly the creators are Northern Lion, BizSnap, and Cobalt Streak. And then Cobalt Streak and Richard Hammer on Twitch doing their we're gonna play until we win streams. But my current favorite game to watch right now has been Age of Empires 2. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe it's the caster, T90, who does it. He makes the game interesting, and as I watch things unfold, as I watch, I've watched some AoE 4, I'm not that interested in it. It's got some interesting mechanics, but AoE 2 is a strategy game that actually kind of unfolds and allows more insight into real war. There was a revelation that I had the other day where there was one player who was obviously losing, like by a lot, and instead of trying to fight head on, they concentrated their forces and broke through the other player to get into their economy, and they couldn't make any more troops, and then they took smart fights to remove the troops from the field and where they couldn't make new ones, and it totally flipped the game on its head. And yeah, it's just a really interesting insight into war, to person versus person. Like, it's just, yeah, it's my new favorite thing to watch. It's not a very exciting end to my list, but that's where I'm ending it.
So you just mentioned 2 games I really appreciate and never got into myself. Like, the Binding of Isaac is a game I remember playing really early on. Like, I forget which build it was for on PC. But I love the idea of dungeon crawlers and of roguelites or roguelikes. And at times, I will have a hankering and I will play a little bit of Binding of Isaac, but I won't get very far because I'm not great at it. But,
yeah, it's a hard game. It's ridiculously hard. That's why I haven't played it. I've watched it.
And there's so many stat boosts and everything and
God.
all the other things.
There's
I'm like,
so
I don't
many
know how to know these. And like now that I think they finally brought Afterbirth Plus or whatever the last one was, or Rebirth Plus or whatever to Xbox, I'm probably going to buy that just to have the complete edition or whatever. And just show support to the devs because congrats. Like,
yeah.
Between Super Meat Boy and that, those guys are amazing.
Yeah. Edmund McMillan and Tyrone, forgot his last name.
Team Meat. But, yeah, Binding of Isaac is a different beast entirely.
Absolutely.
And I think after playing Hades, like, I think it gave me a new appreciation for Binding of Isaac again. And I'll probably go back to it again eventually. And obviously Mosh loves that game too, a lot.
Yeah. He loves it. I got him and my roommate into it just because I watched so much of it. They watched me watch it. Like I said, it has to be on the list because of the thousands. It is the most content that's in my brain. Mm-hmm. Thousands of hours.
And then Age of Empires is another series where, like, I grew up loving RTSs because I loved Warcraft. And
I'm surprised you didn't say StarCraft.
no, like, I never really got... Like, I played the first StarCraft and I liked it. I never played StarCraft 2, though. I need to fix that. But, no, I played a lot of Warcraft 1 and 2 at home, and then my buddy owned Warcraft 3, and it got to the point where, like, I think when the Warcraft movie came out, I looked online and saw, like, oh, Warcraft 3 is only $10 on the Blizzard store. I'll buy it. It might be the only thing I have on that store. But I love Warcraft 3 that much that just having a copy of it makes me happy. Even though now they did Warcraft 3 Reforged, and I'm kind of pissed, but you know what it is. It is what it is.
Yep.
That's the story for another time. But, yeah, RTSs are kind of one of those things where, like, since I mostly play on console, it's not something I get to dive into too much.
Yeah, console would be hard.
And I do, like, Halo Wars, I think, brings that vibe to me enough where I'm kind of happy, but, like, I really want to try out more of the Age of Empires games. Because all 4 of them are now readily available too. Microsoft made sure they remastered all of them before 4 came out, and they just released new content for 2 and 3, I think, as well.
I don't know. I mean, then, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's just kind of wild how it's wild to see, like, a series that's been around for so long you don't hear a lot of people talk about unless they're in the gaming space, and then you realize there's a huge following for it.
Oh yeah,
like when you start looking. It's crazy. Yeah, 2 very good picks, gotta say. All right, so my number 1 is Nier Automata. If you've seen my name is now Nearly Crazy, you might be wondering what the Nearly's for. Yeah, it's for Nier. Nier Automata. So the background of this game, it is technically the second game of a 2-game series so far. It's a sequel to Nier. But this technically, if you include the original games, Drakengard, I think it's technically the 5th game in the series. Although the timelines are all messed up, so I don't know if it's a direct sequel to the second game, because the third one might spin off a different timeline. It's all weird. Moral of the story is, there are people that love Miyamoto. There are people that love Kojima. There are these just creators in the game industry that you see do things and people talk about them. No matter what they're releasing, like Kojima with Metal Gear, Death Stranding, even when he was trying to work on a Silent Hill game, people went crazy. Miyamoto, anything he touches, people are going to talk about whether it's good or not. Because he is Nintendo. And even Mikami, like between Resident Evil and Evil Within and everything else he's worked on, he is a huge part of the game industry. But the one that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, is Yoko Taro. And Yoko Taro is the guy behind the Dragon Guard and Nier games. And he has such an interesting philosophy in game design. It's kind of wild. And if you've played any of his games, you probably know what I mean. Like, it was kind of like how... This was the introduction to like how Yakuza made me feel, where I was crying and laughing and crying and laughing. This is, like, Nier Automata was the game where I was literally... I didn't know how to feel. Like, it changed me afterwards. It was the first time I've played a game, and I couldn't stop thinking about it for days after playing. I was thinking, like, I should go back and replay it. It's a game I go back to and replay the first few hours, and then I have to go play other things because I have a lot of things I need to play. But
yeah,
because I love games.
All the games.
But Nier Automata is a game where you play as an android named 2B. The B stands for Battle Unit, if I remember correctly. And basically, you're there to go back to the planet of Earth and clear out the machine so humans can inhabit it again. And if only the story was that simple. Some people say you have to replay the game 5 times. I look at it as a 5-act structure, and it gives you a lot of viewpoints on everything. And without spoiling things, that's important. The soundtrack is second to none. It's one of those times where, like, I tell people, if you're not going to play the Nier games, at least listen to Nier Automata soundtrack, and you will realize, like, I could hardly imagine anyone saying it's a bad soundtrack. I can imagine people saying, like, this might be a little too aggressive for me. This might be a little too wild. Or I don't understand what they're saying, because Yoko Taro went to the effort to make their own language in the game for the lyrics of the music. It's kind of wild. And then there's, like, some songs where they add in English and Japanese and a couple other languages, too, in the background, and you're like, oh, this is all melding together. And yeah, it's a hard game to talk about without spoiling anything, but it's one of those games. I will make sure this comes to the channel at some point, because I can't explain how much I love this game.
Alright.
Yeah, it's different. It's one of those times where you're like, that's the end, and then you play more, and you're like, is that the end? And you play more, and you're like, I don't know if I can take this heartbreak anymore. You're like, oh, I feel a little good, and then you feel heartbreak again. Kind of the same way we felt about AI, the Somnium Files. Yeah. It has those moments.
Thinking about it.
It has a lot of those moments that you're like, what's going on? Oh, no. Really? No. And then you just get different perspectives of different characters, and I think the moral of the story of Nier, there's many of them, but the main one I stick to is what it means to be human. And it's a really important story when you're dealing with androids, machines, and a lot of philosophical things. It talks over bits of religion. It dives into so much stuff in such a deep manner, and people are just like, oh, that's just the waifu lady with the big butt. I'm like, no, 2B is more than that. 9S is more than that. A2 is more than that. They're some of my favorite characters of all time. It was enough for me to, like, when I changed my gamertag name and everything, I changed it to an ode to my old name and to this game specifically. Because I just love these games. And it's one of those things, too, like, if you have the choice and you're not sure how much you're willing to dive into the series, at least play Automata. I know it's a sequel to the original Nier, and, like, it got re-released this current year as Nier Replicant version 1.2 blah 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 blah. But if you think that you're not going to get into the series because of Nier Replicant, just go straight to Automata. You don't need that background, because I started with Automata, and I can tell you, like, would I have appreciated Automata a little bit more that first time I played it? Maybe. But it's also my favorite game of all time. It was the first one I played. And if this is going to be your first time ever playing it, if you do, I am jealous. Because that's how good it is.
Yep. That's how our favorite games are.
Yes. wild, to say the very least. And Yoko Taro was such an interesting person too. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of him. He's like, so I don't know if you know what the Nier mascot usually is. It's like a moon-looking face with a smile on it and open eyes.
Okay.
I'll show you a picture later, but he is well known for, most people don't know what he looks like, his face looks like, because he wears a mask like that at all times. I don't know if it's a mix between, like, maybe he has some disorder, or maybe he just doesn't like how he looks or whatever. And
or
very
just likes to have fun.
Yeah, and that too. He's such an interesting person, and yeah, most people don't see his face because he's just such an interesting individual in the best way possible. And the fact that you're putting this creative genius, and he worked with Platinum Games on this, so the guys behind Bayonetta did the combat and everything. And I'm like, you just took a crazy man directing an amazing team, and you put them together, and I'm like, this could have been chaos, or it could have been the best thing ever. It's a mix of both. It's chaotic goodness. But yeah, Nier
Chaotic
Automata.
best.
Chaos Control. But, yeah.
So, there's our favorite games.
Remember when we said this might be around 20 minutes?
Yeah, no.
No, definitely not.
But there are our favorite games. Let us know your thoughts on our favorite games, and let us know your favorite games. Come into the Discord, start a discussion. If we continue the series, we'll respond in the comments and in the next one.
Yeah, this was fun. This is different from our usual content too, and
Yeah,
I'm glad we finally took the first step.
sitting here in front of a microphone, and that's it. That's all we got.
I mean, it's kind of what we do behind the scenes anyways, but like,
Yeah, we're just putting it out there.
putting it out there for you guys to enjoy or hate on, either or, we appreciate it.
Yeah, you can hate. I don't mind. I'll take all your hate. Anyway, so guess that wraps it up.
Yeah. So, hopefully we'll see you guys next time. Unless all of a sudden just all of our video content just stops.
Yep.
All of a sudden just like, see like AI is just done halfway through. Oh, nani?
Game over.
But yeah, thanks for stopping by, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye!